The air was thick with laughter and the faint hum of holiday music as I stepped into the Christmas party, my wife's hand nestled in mine.
The air was thick with laughter and the faint hum of holiday music as I stepped into the Christmas party, my wife's hand nestled in mine. Everything seemed perfect, or so I thought. The fire crackled in the corner, casting flickering shadows across familiar faces, and the scent of pine and cinnamon filled the room. But there was something off, something that gnawed at me from the moment we arrived. I couldn't quite place it. My best friend Jake greeted us with his usual grin, though there was an unsettling edge to his smile. My wife, Emma, seemed a little distant, as if lost in a conversation I wasn't part of. I brushed it off at first. After all, it was a festive occasion, and we were here to celebrate, right? But the unease lingered, like a dark cloud hovering just out of sight, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As the evening wore on, my discomfort grew. My wife's laughter fell hollow, her glances too quick, too careful. And then there was Jake always by her side, his presence too persistent, too familiar. But I told myself I was overthinking. Little did I know, the night would unfold in ways I never imagined, unraveling the life I thought I knew. The party was in full swing by the time we arrived, the warmth of fire welcoming us inside. Guests were mingling, exchanging stories and laughter, glasses of wine and champagne in hand. It felt like any other holiday gathering, people celebrating the season, indulging the comfort of familiar faces and cheerful music. I smiled, greeting friends and family as I scanned the room. Emma and I hadn't been out in a while, and I was eager to enjoy the night. Emma squeezed my hand as we made our way through the crowd, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was subtly off. Her laugh, usually so bright, seemed to be forced, just a touch too loud. She'd laugh at jokes, but her eyes would wander toward Jake whenever she thought I wasn't looking. It wasn't overt, but there something in her gaze, the way she'd tilt her head when he spoke, the way they'd share knowing looks. Jake, as always, was the life of the party, cracking jokes and making everyone laugh. He was more than just my best friend. He was practically family. But tonight, something was different. His jokes felt forced, his smiles too wide, as though he was putting on a mask. His eyes lingered on Emma in ways I didn't like, and every time they shared a laugh, a cold, unsettling feeling crept over me. Was I imagining things? As the evening progressed, Emma became more distant. She excused herself to the kitchen, and Jake followed closely behind her. I didn't think much of it first, but a knot formed in my stomach as I watched them disappear down the hallway, leaving me alone with the guests. Time passed. Then I noticed that their absence had stretched longer than I anticipated. I went to find them, but the moment I stepped into the hallway, I froze. What I found next would change everything. I was about to call out their names when I heard the faint sound of whispered laughter, followed by a soft, almost imperceptible sigh. My heart raced, my body frozen in place. I wasn't sure why I was standing there, just outside the kitchen, but something told me to stay still, to listen. I felt the air grow thick around me, and I held my breath as the whispers grew louder. Then it happened, a soft, unmistakable sound of kiss. A wave of nausea hit me, like a ton of bricks. I stepped back, my chest tightening, my hands clammy with sweat. The sound had come from the kitchen. I could hear them both now. Jake's voice, low and hushed, followed by Emma's soft breath in response. I couldn't make out their words, but the implication was clear. They were too close, too intimate for a simple conversation. My mind raced, desperate to deny what was happening. But my gut told me otherwise. My heart hammered against my ribs as I took another step forward, barely able to breathe. I peered around the corner, just in time to see them standing in the kitchen. Emma's back was pressed against the counter, her lips crushed against Jake's. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. Time seemed to slow, the reality of what I was seeing crashing over me in waves. They pulled apart, only for Emma to glance nervously over her shoulder, her face flushed, her breath coming in quick, shallow bursts. Jake turned away slightly, but I could see the faint smirk on his lips. My wife, my best friend, together. I stood there, numb, watching them in the aftermath of what was meant to be a betrayal, yet felt like an execution. The world around me blurred, and for a moment I couldn't move. My mind screamed, but my body remained frozen in place, unable to comprehend the destruction unfolding before me. I didn't confront them, not right away. The shock was too deep, too raw. I needed time to think, to gather myself. But one thing was certain. I couldn't let this go. They had destroyed something precious to me. And in my mind, they deserved to feel that same devastation, that same betrayal. I would make them pay not with anger or violence, but with something far more devastating. Their own guilt, their own unraveling. I began to plan. Slowly, carefully. I didn't need to destroy their lives, just their peace of mind. My first step was to sever the connections between them and the people they trusted most, starting with the circle of friends and family that had surrounded us for years. I knew what they valued. Emma loved the image of being the perfect wife, the doting woman in a picture-perfect marriage. Jake thrived on being the charming best friend, the loyal guy everyone relied on. I'd take that away. I would start with Emma. I knew how to exploit her weaknesses, her insecurities, her fear of losing everything she'd worked so hard to build. I'd subtly plant seeds of doubt. A word here, a glance there, questions about her character, her trustworthiness. I'd make her question everything, including herself. As for Jake, I knew his pride was his greatest flaw. I would expose his actions to the people he cared about, those who would judge him harshly for betraying a friend. Slowly, methodically, I'd tear down the facades they'd so carefully constructed. Their relationship would crumble not with a loud bang, but with a whisper that would spread like wildfire. I wouldn't act recklessly. This was a slow burn of quiet, calculated revenge, and I would watch them crumble from the shadows, savoring every second. I knew the best revenge was one they wouldn't see coming, something so insidious that would make them question everything they thought they knew. The first step was isolating them, creating a distance that would unravel their connection, their comfort, and their control. I began with Emma. She and I had always been a team, at least. That's what I had believed. So, when I started planting small seeds of doubt, it felt like a cruel game. I would casually mention things she hadn't noticed, how distant she'd been lately, how her friends were starting to notice the strain in our relationship. I'd throw out little comments that made her question Jake's loyalty. Things like, Jake's been awfully close to you lately. He's always around when I'm not. The discomfort in her eyes was enough. At first, she brushed it off, but I saw the cracks beginning to form. Emma became more paranoid, second-guessing her every move. She would call me more often when we weren't together, desperately asking if I was okay, if I still trusted her. It was perfect. I had her questioning herself, questioning her decisions. But Jake, his turn would come too. I knew how much he thrived on his reputation. His friends looked up to him, saw him as the ultimate guy's guy, the loyal, dependable best friend. I began to subtly plant rumors about his affair with Emma. I made sure it was whispered in the right circles, dropped in casual conversations where the words would stick people who would eventually spread the gossip. It started slow. At first, it was just an offhand remark to a mutual friend, who would later share the story with others. Then, the whispers grew louder, and Jake began to feel the heat. Friends started avoiding him, and I could see the discomfort in his eyes when they questioned him about his relationship with Emma. The man who had once been untouchable was now unraveling. Emma and Jake had no idea where it was coming from, but they felt it. The pressure, the distrust. Their bond began to fray, and I watched from the sidelines, savoring every moment. My revenge was complete, not with rage, but with a slow, suffocating pressure that crushed them both. It wasn't just a betrayal I had to face, it was their ruin. And I couldn't have been more satisfied. The revenge was complete, yet I found no satisfaction in the aftermath. Watching Emma and Jake suffer, seeing the trust between them crumble piece by piece, wasn't the victory I'd imagined. In fact, it fell hollow. The slow unraveling of their lives, their friendships, their dignity, it should have felt like justice. But instead, it felt like I was just a spectator to their misery. Emma stopped coming around. She tried to salvage what was left of our marriage, but the damage was irreparable. The trust was gone. Jake, once my closest friend, became a shadow of the man I had known. He avoided me, unable to look me in the eye, too aware of the whispers surrounding him. But instead of relishing their downfall, I was left with a gnawing emptiness. What had I gained? Their suffering had never been my true goal. The truth was, I wanted to hurt them, yes, but more than that, I wanted them to feel the same hopelessness, the same betrayal I'd felt. But I'd lost something too. In my pursuit of vengeance, I had destroyed any chance of healing. I had become just as hollow as they were. I sat alone in my apartment, reflecting on the wreckage I'd caused. The anger had dissipated, replaced by a deep, overwhelming sadness. I thought of the life I'd had with Emma, the friendship I'd shared with Jake. All of it was gone now, and for what? I realized that revenge had never truly been about them. It had been about me, my inability to move past the hurt. As I sat there, I knew there was no turning back. The damage had been done. But in the quiet that followed, I also knew one thing. Revenge had been its own punishment, and I was left to live with the ruins of it all.